Hi, I'm Sheila Layton. Welcome to the Beyond Coincidence Show, where every moment holds a miracle and we talk about seeing the hand of God in our lives. Call it a God wink or a tender mercy or whatever you want. Everyone on this show has seen the hand of God or their higher power in their lives in a very real and personal way. Hey everybody, welcome to the Beyond Coincidence Show. I have a really amazing guest with me today, and you're going to be super excited that you tuned in today. His name is Ridge Alkonis, and he is a transitioning United States naval officer who spent the last 12 and a half years on active duty. A 2012 graduate of the United States Naval Academy, Ridge served as a surface warfare officer and took part in multiple deployments across the Western Pacific. He has led departments and divisions of up to 50 people and earned a master's degree in acoustics engineering from the Naval Postgraduate School. He spent 2 years serving a mission in the Nagoya, Japan mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where he learned to love the Japanese people with all his heart. Shortly after graduation from the Naval Academy, Ridge married his wife, Brittany, and together they have 3 beautiful children, Liliana, Kalani, and Ridge Jr. As a family, they have moved all across the globe as part of Ridge's naval assignments. While serving in Japan as a weapons officer on the USS Benfold, Ridge fell unconscious due to a medical event while driving and was involved in a fatal car accident while driving down Mount Fuji with his wife and his 3 young children. Ridge was immediately arrested and spent the next 26 days in solitary confinement with no medical treatment after being interrogated daily by the Japanese authorities. I will let Ridge, further on in our interview, tell you about the rest of this story because it truly is a miracle and he saw the hand of God all over this. So welcome, Ridge.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
I'm just really thrilled that you took the time out of your crazy busy life, especially right now, to chat with me. So, Ridge, tell us a little bit about what life looks like today. I know you just moved, so how was that?
Yeah, I mean, getting out of the military is always a big change, and that has definitely been the case for me and my family. We packed up our suitcases and left our home where we were living in California and moved across the country to New England to start a new job for me and to start our life in a new community. And that has been quite the roller coaster. I mean, just getting in the car and driving 3,000 miles is a task in and of itself. But
Yeah, with 3 young kids, yes.
yeah, 3 young kids and a dog, all the way across the country was quite the adventure. But we're excited to be where we are and to see what happens in the future.
So after serving in the military for 12 and a half years, what will you be doing now?
So I got a job as the director of passive acoustic monitoring, which is in the Navy. I was a specialist in sonar, and so I'm going to be using my expertise that I learned in the military to, instead of track submarines from other countries, to track whales and dolphins and make sure that they are are safe from the various human activities that we do off the coast. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to use
Oh,
my
that's
skill
really
set in more ways.
cool. That's really cool. So is it going to be kind of an environmental thing or just like an animal rights activist or just a company that
Well,
is doing a
we
study?
have there's various government regulations and policies for anybody that does offshore work, that they make sure that those actions don't negatively affect the marine mammal population. And so, what I'll be doing is just to help the companies that are doing their various activities adhere to those policies and make sure that they're doing things the right way.
Wow, that's really cool. So you must feel pretty blessed to actually have found a job to be able to use your expertise in. Or there are lots of jobs in that area. I've just never really heard a lot of acoustic
No,
engineering.
no. I am very fortunate, and especially after everything that's happened to me, I feel even more fortunate to kind of land on my feet and have a future immediately, because it was a scary thought to think that not only that I may be leaving my family in a difficult spot financially and fiscally and all of that. So I'm very fortunate.
Right. Now, did I say your last name right? Is it
Yeah.
Alconis?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure I say it right. But before we even say much more, I just want to say thank you for your service. I'm Canadian. Whoever, I mean, the men and women that serve our countries and keep us free and safe, I am forever grateful. My brother-in-law served in the U.S. Air Force for 25 years as a fighter pilot, so I know the sacrifices that you make and your family makes to keep our country safe. And I just want to say thank you for that because
Thank you.
that's that's an amazing gift that you have given your country.
Thank you.
So, okay, Ridge, let's go back and talk to me for a few minutes about what life was like growing up in your home. How many children? Did religion play a part? Was God present? How did that all look like for you?
Yeah, so I grew up the oldest of five children in a suburb of Los Angeles. And yes, faith and God was a big part of our lives. I grew up as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And not only my immediate family, but my father's family was very faith centered. And so every family get together that I can remember had some sort of spiritual aspect to it.
Wow.
And yeah, and that was a huge blessing for me to kind of see what it meant to live a Christ-centered life, as well as on top of that, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has various programs and activities that as a young kid, whether it be 5, 6, 7 elementary school age into my high school years, there's always some way or some organization that can help you nurture your faith and become closer to God. And I was a big recipient of those activities and the goodness of people that put their unbelievable talents into making sure that I had the opportunity to grow my own faith.
That's fantastic. So, both of your parents, were they both members of the church or did they grow up in other faiths?
No, yes. Well, in my home, they were both members of the church. My mother was baptized in her college years. My
Oh,
father
okay.
grew up a member of the church, and but as in my home, as I grew up, my parents were both members of the church.
Yeah. Okay. So now, as you progressed into your teen years, did you ever question God, or how did you work on how did your relationship with God kind of progress? Was it kind of an aha moment, or was it a line upon line situation? How did that work?
I don't remember any aha moments or think something clicking. What I do remember when I think about those times as a teenager, where I felt the most at peace, where I felt the most at home. And like I said, I have these strong memories of family reunions and family get togethers of people bearing testimony of their faith and their belief in Jesus Christ. I have incredible memories of before going to high school, all the kids I went to school with that were also members of our faith would meet together and we would study the scriptures together. And we had fantastic teachers, and I just have these incredible memories from those time periods. And I think those moments to me are really where my faith grew, and then the day to day, the way that I saw my parents live a Christ centered life, just unbelievably service oriented and constantly trying to be a positive member of not only our church community but our city community and my neighborhood, and those things stuck and helped me as I my more intellectual side grew and I thought about faith more. Than I had these strong backbones or memories to fall back on to understand God's role in my life.
Yeah. So had you always wanted to serve a mission, or was this just, kind of a thing that you thought you should do, or how did that sort of
No,
happen?
so for me, I remember being in high school and everyone just kind of assumed that I was going to become a missionary. And I remember that, man, no one ever like asked me. No one ever asked, hey, is this something that I want to do? And that always kind of bothered me that there was this expectation that that was what I was going to be and what I was going to become. So then I went to college. I went to the Naval Academy and I did 2 years. So I was 20 years old by the time I left as a missionary. At the time, most missionaries left when they were 19. So I was a little bit older. And I remember
But,
thinking,
that was
okay,
probably super helpful, right? Like you were a little bit more mature. You had been through some structure. You had been away from home where a lot of kids hadn't. So your transition was probably not as difficult as some kids.
oh, well, that's definitely the case, especially coming from a military school. The level of structure and discipline required to be a missionary was something that I was very familiar with and comfortable with.
Right.
So that wasn't a big deal. But before I left, I wanted to make sure that it was my decision and that I was going for the right reasons. And so I remember one day saying, okay, if I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this 100%, and it's going to become the new focus of my life. This isn't just going to be something that I have to do or should do. It's going to be something that I am going to do. And I remember making that decision and starting to meet with my bishop, and who is the head of our congregation, and doing the various kind of logistical steps to becoming a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter Day Saints. And I never looked back.
Good for you. Wow, that's awesome. So you got called to Japan and were there for 2 years, I'm assuming. And so that's when you really learned to love the Japanese people.
Oh, totally. And we'll get into my story in a bit, but it's still they still are. I still love the Japanese people with all my heart. And people ask me that a lot about do I have any changed feelings, or and the answer is most certainly no. The people that I
It's
grew to love.
so cool, Ridge. As you're speaking, my mind is just starting to spin, and I'm thinking, okay, this might sound crazy, but the Lord knew that this was going to happen in your life, right? He foresaw this. This is going to happen in Ridge's life. So I'm going to send him years before to Japan on a mission so that he learns to love those people. And when this terrible event happens, he's going to love them because he already does. I mean, that may not be the case, but that's how my mind works, is like, there are no coincidences. This isn't a coincidence that you went to Japan on your mission and that this terrible event happened in Japan with people that you already loved. You don't have the animosity towards the Japanese people that most people would have. So I think that's just really cool right off the bat. One more question before you get into your experience. Had you always wanted to serve in the military, or was this just something that kind of happened?
I mean, I had some members of my family who had served in the military, so it was something that I was interested in. But more, I just wanted to make sure that service was a part of my career. My father was a career firefighter, and I was surrounded by people in the military, and I thought, okay, well, this seems like a line of work that I am compatible with. And on the more kind of, I don't know, just I was definitely afraid of not having a job after I graduated from college. And so going to the Naval Academy, graduating and having an automatic job was something that was very appealing to me.
Yeah.
And I like working with teams and working to accomplish hard things with big groups of people. And so the military seemed like a logical fit. And yeah, it was for a long time.
That's cool. So I don't know a lot about the military and how that works, but so did you choose Navy right away, or do you go to a training facility and kind of get put in your where your best aptitude is? How does that work?
The academies are a bit different. You apply just like you would every other college, and there's three main service academies in the United States: the Air Force Academy, the Naval Academy, and then the Military Academy at West Point for the Army. And so I only applied to the Naval Academy. For me, it was the one that I was most interested in, and they also gave me an opportunity to continue my athletic career as a baseball player. So that was another plus.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and I grew up near the water and loving the ocean, and so the Navy seemed like a great way to make sure that I was going to be near the coast for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, it just seemed like the perfect fit for you. So you went right out of high school to the Naval Academy.
Yep. I graduated, and 2 weeks later, I was in their version of boot camp.
Wow. So you went to the Naval Academy for 2 years?
So I went for 2 years. Then I went on my mission for 2 years. I came back, finished 2 more years of school, graduated, earned my commission, and then immediately, then I got married, and then my wife and I got on a plane and went to Japan to start my first assignment.
Wow. Okay, that's exciting. So tell me now, let's get into this experience. Give some backstory, give dates, and just let us hear your story about where you saw the hand of God moving in all of this. So I'll just let you go for it now.
Yeah, so I mean, like my bio said, I was driving down Mount Fuji when I was involved in a car accident due to a medical emergency, and eventually I was sentenced to 3 years in Japanese prison.
So when did this all take place?
So the accident happened May 2021.
So May of 2021. So we're still kind of a little bit in COVID, and your
Yep.
family was there living in Japan with you at the time?
Yes, they were in the
Okay,
car.
so you were just having a family vacation to Mount Fuji.
Yes. So I was scheduled to deploy in the upcoming days, and so my middle daughter wanted to visit Mount Fuji before I left, and so we took a family trip on a Saturday, and unfortunately, it turned into a really bad day for everybody involved.
So tell me, what exactly happened? I mean, like you said, there was an accident, but how can you talk about it? Like, are you able to talk about it now?
Yeah, yeah. So I was driving down the mountain, and I got this. It's a hard feeling to explain, but I was talking to my daughter, and that was the last thing that I remember when I fell unconscious. And unfortunately, and I was driving the car. Unfortunately, the car went into a parking lot, and I hit a few parked cars that also unfortunately hit a few pedestrians, and those pedestrians ended up passing away in the coming days. And that's something that
And you don't remember any of this because you were unconscious, right?
I was unconscious. But yes, the the accident itself, I are it's hard for me to explain or to convey the level of sorrow and remorse that I feel for everyone that was affected by this accident. Because especially when we're going to talk a lot about what happened to me, but it's important to understand that this accident was a tragedy for everybody involved, not just myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's the crash. And then what happened right after that?
So then I'm arrested. I'm put into solitary confinement for the next
Had you
26
come
days.
to, did you come to at the accident site or did they?
Yes, yes. Eventually, I had come to. I mean, the airbags went off. I don't remember any of that. But eventually, I come to. I'm arrested. I'm taken away, and I'm kept in a Japanese police station for the next 26 days. Where there, I'm interrogated. No medical care, no legal counsel, things like that. And those are normal within the Japanese judicial system.
And so what is your wife doing during all of this? Like she's freaking out because she can't see you, doesn't really know what's going on, doesn't know if you're even okay.
I'm during this time. I'm not sure. I honestly, we have not talked a ton. I know this is a very difficult time for her, and that she had to manage a lot of people reaching out to her to see what was going on. Still having to take care of my kids. I was 2 hours away, so trying to get to the police station as often as she could. But yeah, those were a difficult 26 days, and then eventually I'm released on bail, and I go through about a year long legal battle, which ends in July of 2022, where I am finally sentenced after all the appeals had played out, and my 3 year sentence becomes final, and I check into to prison.
Oh, wow. So during that year, were you in Japan?
I was in Japan.
And were you able to work in that year?
I did work. I had to work in under a slightly different capacity than I had been because I was no longer able to deploy or leave the country. But I was working.
Okay, and so you had to do legal battle, which I mean, you hired a Japanese lawyer, did you then? Or
Yep, I had a Japanese lawyer.
and did you think that was going to go well? Like, I mean, what were you thinking during that time and were you
Uh,
praying? How did you see God kind of in that?
so that time, I did not see God in those moments. To be honest with you, I felt abandoned. I had spent my entire life being told that if I pray and follow the commandments, that I would be blessed, both spiritually and temporally. And I was begging, and not just me, hundreds, if not thousands, of people were praying and fasting for hearts to be softened and for me to remain out of prison. And time after time again, it it seemed like that was not going to be my reality. And so I was just struggling with this feeling of abandonment. And so then I remember one day I thought, I've got to figure this out. I've got to come to grips with this. And if I'm going to believe that God really has abandoned me. And I came across this book from Spencer W. Kimball called Faith Precedes the Miracle. And in that book, there is a section that talks about essentially why bad things happen to good people. And he outlines some very specific instances, like missionaries being injured or killed in the line of service, or plane crashes, or illnesses. And he says in that book that he didn't doesn't know how much God puts in our path as trials, or and how much he just allows, because that's a part of his plan of salvation and his and the path for us to return to
Right.
his glory.
Yeah, I mean, how much of that is just mortality, and he allows mortality to happen to stretch and grow us, right? And so, I mean, I actually don't believe that God sends trials. I don't think he has to. That's not kind or loving, right? They just happen because life's hard and it sucks sometimes.
Yeah, and that is the plan of salvation. That is
Right.
what I believe, that God, when people talk about God's will, us exercising our agency and us living through these trials is what we signed up for, and is what is ultimately going to allow us to become more like Him, and ultimately return to His presence.
So
And
did that bring you peace at all? Like reading that book, did it bring you peace, or did you still feel like, but yeah, but where's God in my story?
no, no, it definitely brought me a higher level of understanding, that here's somebody that I view as one of the most a spiritual giant, someone who is closer to God than I will ever be. And
Just explain to people who Spencer W. Kimball was.
so Spencer W. Kimball is a former president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and has written several books that are just incredible evidences of his spiritual maturity. And I had never heard of this one. He has other ones that are more popular, or I would say. But so seeing someone of his stature and of his clout say, I can't say for sure how much God puts in front of us and how much He's just letting play out. And there are evident, like Paul in the New Testament says very clearly that he believes that some of the trials that he went through were put in front of him so that he could become what God needed him to be, so that he could record Holy Scripture. And
Right,
so I'm sure that that does happen. But does it happen to everyone, or does it even? That is what I don't believe. That
right,
most of what we encounter is just a part of a larger plan that doesn't have God working as some sort of puppeteer.
right. Yeah, it's all about agency, right? I
Mhm.
mean, their agency to convict you. And yeah, so you read it, what's it called again? And Spencer W. Kimball, we also believe was a prophet of God. So he had great faith and great leadership. And yeah, so what was it? What was that book called again?
It's called Faith Precedes the Miracle.
Oh, Faith Precedes the Miracle. Okay, so you found that book and you read it and you're like, oh, okay,
Yeah, yeah, and that was kind of the first moment where I thought, okay, I understand a little bit better about where I am in this. And then the next step was, okay, if that's kind of God's role, then what is Jesus Christ as my Savior? What's His role in these trials? What's His role in when I'm feeling abandoned, or I'm not feeling close to God as maybe I should be. And so that one I really tried to figure out, okay, well, if the atonement and the and him dying on the cross was his major gift to me, then what did he do as a part of that, and that I can access? And what I really found, or what really spoke to me, is that Jesus, he took upon himself the infirmities and all these things, the worst parts of our lives. But for what purpose? And it's to so that he can succor us, so that he can comfort us, so he can stand by us in our lowest and hardest moments. And I can tell you with a surety that I felt that. I
How did that, so you felt that, so tell me when and what that felt like. Like, part of the podcast is to help people understand, one, how the spirit speaks to them, but also two, how they can feel, what does comfort feel like? Like, what did that feel like for you when you're in those dark moments and you're like, are you there, God? What, I mean, is that what you said? Or how did you, basically, how did you call down the powers of heaven, and what did that feel like?
Yeah, I think the first thing is you need to reframe your request, because in the beginning, all I wanted to do was stay out of prison. So once
Yeah.
that was gone, once I was in prison, then I thought, okay, well, what now? What am I going to pray for? And
So what did that, before we get into that, what, I mean, you're in this courtroom and then you're like, okay, you're going to prison. What was that feeling like? Were you expecting that, or were you kind of
so
expecting that?
it played out in a couple different courtrooms. The first time was an absolute shock, and for reasons that aren't really applicable here, but the last and final time, it was something that I was more emotionally ready for. It wasn't as much of a shock.
And so you
So
went to court a few times over a whole year period before they finally sentenced you.
yes, yes. So then I get to prison, and I think, okay, I have to figure out how to live. This is my new reality, and I
And it was
prayed.
a 3-year sentence.
3 year sentence. So I remember thinking on my first day there, okay, that's, and I don't know. I still to this day I haven't done the math to figure out if I was right, but I remember sitting in my cell going, okay, that's 1,095 days. We got to figure out how to tackle this so that I can make it. And I remember asking my heavenly Father, okay, I need the strength to make sure that I maintain my physical, mental, and spiritual strength for the next 1,095 days. And I need a little bit more than what I have to get there. And
Yeah.
so I remember when I would come up with various strategies, I would organize my time in a way that would break up the days. Because a lot of days I never left my cell. My cell was roughly 2 meters by 4 meters, and I wouldn't leave it for days, weeks, months at a time sometimes. And so I had to figure out how to turn that little square into a place where I could better myself. And as I would come up with these strategies, and I just remember this feeling that, okay, I'm capable of retaining what I'm learning.
Oh
I'm
my God.
capable of continuing to better myself because yeah, I really want to help people understand what it felt like for me in those moments when I was trying to understand God's role in my new existence as a incarcerated prisoner.
Oh,
And I really just wanted to, and I think more than anything, like I said, I felt that comfort, that succoring that only Jesus Christ can offer you. And I was alone. There was no opportunity to receive that from any other source. And there were little things like I remember in the various strategies that I used to keep myself going. And when I was isolated, I could feel just a little bit more encouragement, a little bit more emotional strength than I should have been that I should have had in those moments. And even when it got really bad, I remember there was one time I was really struggling and I just felt so alone. I hadn't seen anybody in a long time, and the cell just felt like it was so much smaller than it had been.
now, were you by yourself in the cell, or did you have
Just
a? You did.
by myself.
Okay.
And a letter showed up that day, and I just remember thanking not only my heavenly Father, but the person who sent that letter, the lifeline, because that's what I viewed it as. And so many times the way God spoke to me was through the goodwill and strength of others.
Now, was your wife able to visit you at all during this time?
Yes, yes, my wife had visitation rights that varied throughout my 537 days.
So that's how long you were incarcerated, was 537 days. Oh. And so did she stay in Japan the whole time or did she go back to the US?
She stayed in Japan, minus a few trips to Washington D.C. to advocate for me to various politicians and decision makers. But other than that, she was in Japan.
She was in Japan. So there you are in prison, you're feeling alone, you see God's hand, you're feeling peace, you get a letter. In the meantime, she's not sitting back going, okay, well, I guess for 3 years in prison. She doesn't do that, right?
No, no, and I mean, if people want to hear more about this story, Facebook, Instagram, Bring Ridge Home, that's where you can see the majority of what she did in one place. And but she was amazing. She went to Washington D.C. and demanded from the most powerful people in the world that they use their influence to earn my release. So, like I said earlier, 1,095 days is what I was sentenced to, and I only did about half of that, and that was largely because of the work of that was led by my wife, but included many followers and supporters from all across the globe.
Wow. So she must have seen the hand of God in some of that because, I mean, what does she know about that kind of politics? And she was ready to lead the charge. And like you say, started up all kinds of Facebook and Instagram, Bring Ridge Home. What would you say if you know one of her more powerful experiences in all of that? Have you talked about that?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about that. Now, we both of us are constantly trying to unravel the spiritual side of these things, and when we felt, what did God's love and God's feelings really, when did it creep into our lives, and what effect did it have? But I mean, I remember from me, I won't speak anything for my wife, but I remember hearing stories from others that were around her when she was advocating in Washington D.C. that she had this uncanny ability to know where she needed to be to create the most influence. And sometimes that was to be on a certain street corner or to wait in front of a certain coffee shop. And time after time again, her intuitions and her gut feelings was correct. And the way that it was described to me was that there was no other way that was divine intervention, that she was able to know so clearly where to be and when to be there.
So that she could talk to the right people.
Yeah.
So the government actually stepped in and helped out. Did they originally even want to listen to her or did they just dismiss her in the beginning?
Yeah, I think it took a while, but eventually, so she spent 61 days camped out in front of the White House with my kids, homeschooling them, asking
61.
for 61 days, until she ultimately had a meeting with the national security advisor in the White House, and that was the kind of the turning point when she started gaining more support. Ultimately, she continued to meet with people, to include the vice president of the United States, and ultimately President Biden, the president of the United States, and
Wow.
those folks met with their Japanese counterparts to advocate for my early release, which eventually did happen in December, or my transfer back to the United States in December of 2023.
So just a year ago, you got transferred back to the US.
Yes.
Did you know all this that was going on, or were you kind of not really privy to the information?
I knew some. I didn't know all. A lot of the what was going on was politically sensitive, and so we had to be very careful about what was shared, and all the communications that I had were monitored. And so
Right.
I didn't I knew the kind of high level things, but no, I did not know the inner workings of what was happening.
Right. And I guess they didn't really need you to know that, right?
No, no, it wasn't very applicable to me, which is hard and is a hard part about prison. No matter what the circumstances are, the world keeps spinning around you, but you stay the same, and none of it is applicable to you. And coming to grips with that is difficult.
So thankfully, you could speak Japanese, so you knew what they were saying and you could
Yes,
communicate with them.
yes, and that was a blessing inside the prison. I was able to use that in positive ways to include translating for other English speaking inmates. And also, it helped me get a spot in the tailor shop working and or creating and mending prison clothes that ultimately gave me a new skill. And so now I know how to use a sewing machine and can make and fix my own clothes. And I was so grateful for that because now I get to walk out and I've got something I can hang my hat on. And hey, I learned something. I am better now
So
because
did you recognize that as a blessing, like at the time?
totally, totally.
How did that even happen? How did you end up working as a tailor when you don't even know how to sew?
Well, luckily for me, most prisoners when they show up don't know how to sew, and so they needed somebody. And I told the during the end process, that, hey, I want to work and I want to be as active as I possibly can. And so that was the job that the prison administrators chose for me, and that was something that was not normal for a foreign prisoner. But luckily enough, they trusted me and allowed me to do that and provided a great blessing to me going forward.
So you know that that was the hand of God working in your behalf, even though this was a hard situation. The Lord was like, okay, let's give him purpose, right? Because I'm sure that's probably a killer part of prison is I have no purpose, and what is my day
Oh,
going to look like?
totally. Yeah,
So
you have to find your purpose. And I think about what that once again, what is the will of God? What is the hand of God? I believe that often the way that that manifests is in the softening of hearts. And
yeah,
I a lot of people in that prison viewed me as they loved me a little bit more than maybe they should have. And I believe that there
wow,
was some definite divine intervention for some softening of hearts there.
right, yeah. That like you say, normally they're like, you're some white American guy. Why would they even like you? Why would they not make your life more miserable, not better?
Hmm. No,
So
exactly.
that was
Yeah,
cool for
and
you to be able to do that. And so when you were able to, did you work in the tailor shop every day? So that was kind of like a job.
it was like a job. It was, I mean, 5 days a week minus holidays and things like that. But yes, it was 8 hours a day, and that was my job. I didn't get paid very much, but yeah, that was my job.
So why would you? This is a really dumb question because I don't know. Why would you need money in prison? Did you have to pay for stuff?
No, no, I don't need money. You can live off of absolutely nothing. Uh, I didn't spend any money, but no, the work they do is mainly for rehabilitation purposes. Some people can use the money that they earn to pay back debts that they have, but for me, it was just really something to keep me busy and to keep my mind in a safe and good place.
So in your daily prayers, were you pray what would you pray for? Would you pray for softening of hearts? Would you pray for mental stability? Like what would you pray for? Do you remember?
I don't remember praying. I don't remember praying for anything for me, honestly. I remember praying that my family would be taken care of, that people would love them and respect my wife. I remember praying that people would know how to best use their time on my behalf, and that people would be willing to understand the intricacies and the details of my case so that they would be willing to help.
Did originally they think you had done this on purpose?
No, well, I don't think so. What I was accused of was falling asleep, and so
Oh,
that was kind of the main thing that we were fighting. Uh, but no one ever thought I did this on purpose. I mean, like three little kids in the car and a wife,
right.
1 o'clock
Yeah.
in the afternoon. So there was never anything like that. But anytime you're asking a politician or someone of influence to expend their influence or political capital on your behalf, you have to convince them that it's worth the effort.
Right.
And that is no small task, no matter where
So,
you are.
yeah. So, what was your wife's like fighting point? Why, I'm going to go before these really powerful men and I'm going to say, this is why you should save my husband. What was her fighting point? Was it because, hey, listen, he's serving your country and this was a medical thing? Or what was her fighting
So
words?
that was a part of it, and but it wasn't most of it. So her big selling point is that I was just one of many of thousands of people serving in Japan, and that if we did not, and we being the United States, do not protect the rights to due process for our service members serving abroad, then they are vulnerable, and
That's
that
true. Yes.
is not right. So yes, it was about me and restoring my family and fixing the injustice of it, but on a larger scale, it was about advocating for the other sailors that maybe don't have a wife like mine, or have a family, or have the ability to speak out and to make it as big of a deal as it should be.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like you say, for you, but also for all of the servicemen and women, it makes, like you say, it makes you more vulnerable. If other countries think, oh, the Americans aren't looking after their girls and their guys, we can take advantage of that.
Hmm.
And that's pretty powerful words, right? Like that's pretty fantastic. So, Ridge, was there ever a point through this time while you were in prison that you actually felt this is going to be okay? Or were you
No.
kind of left in the dark?
No, I never felt like it was going to be okay. And because okay is a relative word. What is okay to you, it could be very different than is okay with me. And okay became a word that we avoided it
Oh,
because people would say everything's going to be okay. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that I'm going to stay out of jail? I'm going to get out of jail tomorrow? Does that mean that when I get out, I'm going to be alive? What okay can mean is too hard to understand. And so, no, I didn't think that. What I do remember is that one point I stopped assuming that I was going to be released any sooner than the 1,095 days.
I wondered if you just you sort of set your mind on that 1095 days and thought, okay, this is what it is.
Yep, yep, this is my reality, and I need to focus 100% on how to do what's in front of me in the best way possible. And because that's all I can control. And so that's
Right.
what I focused on, to the point where I did not. I remember the day that they told that my wife called when I was in the detention center in Los Angeles after I'd been transferred, that I was being released. And I didn't believe it. And I hung up the phone, and I thought, oh, that's weird. I should feel something more.
So tell me, so you're in Japan and how did that all play out? I'm in Japan and then you're back in LA. How did that all play out?
Yeah, so I was transferred back to the United States via a prisoner transfer treaty. So I came back to the United States, and then essentially my case was re-adjudicated by the US judicial system.
So did you think at that point, oh, I might get out, or did you still think I've still got so many days to serve?
No, at that point I knew at some point I was gonna get out. At that point I could then meet with my lawyers, and they could kind of tell me, okay, this is how we see this is gonna go, and
So
I
you
didn't
were
know.
feeling pretty hopeful then once they came to you and said, okay, we're transferring you to the US. Is that what happened? They just came in one day and said, hey, we're transferring you to the US.
There's a few steps in between, but yes, on the day of, they came in and said, "Hey, today's the day," and I got on a flight,
And did
and
you kind of, was that sort of surreal?
no, because I still felt very much like a prisoner. When you're walking around in handcuffs, the rest of nothing else really matters.
That's true. When you're in handcuffs, whether you're in Japan or in the US, you still feel like a prisoner.
Exactly, and
So you
so
still were essentially a prisoner, even though you were back in the US.
yes, yes, I was pending the adjudication of my case from the U.S. judicial system.
And were you in prison then in the US?
Yep, yep. 28 days in a federal detention center in downtown Los Angeles. And then ultimately I was released. But yeah, so hope, you mentioned the word hope. hope was something that I avoided like the plague, because when you get hopeful, then there's an opportunity to be let down. And when you have no support system to help prop you up or deal with those things, it became catastrophic. And so that's when I said, "Hey, I am not even going to think about anything that has to do with the timeline. I'm just here to do my time, and when the day comes, it'll then awesome. But I can't think about or hope for that day."
Right. That's just too much in case it doesn't happen. So, in your military training, do they train? So say you're like a prisoner of war, because I mean, not that you were in war, but you were a prisoner. Is there training that they sort of train you to be like, hey, don't go to the hope space because it's gonna be too scary and too hopeless?
The pilots go through training like that, but me as a surface ship guy did not ever get that training. But what I tell people all the time, that being on a ship and being on deployments is remarkably close to being in jail. And so, kind of the day to day drudgery of things not changing,
Yeah, like
and
when you're
having to,
deployed for months at a time and you're on a ship with a bunch of guys and it's a closed space, kind of like prison.
yep, yep. And so, without a lot of access to outside entertainment and things like that. So, in a lot of ways, I was prepped for it more than the average person. But yeah, the absence of hope was something that was kind of critical to me maintaining any resemblance of sanity. And but that's a tricky thing, because you have to also so that way, when then I'm looking, if you're looking at the hand of God in my life, then that's when it really shifts towards, okay, I need help surviving. I need help being the best version of myself. And so that's what I when I speak to people, when I tell my story, that's what we my wife and I focus on, is the ability for Jesus Christ and our heavenly Father, for God to be a comforter, to be a supporter, and that he will not abandon us. But that doesn't mean that he's going to take away our hardest trials.
Yeah. So do you think that that is probably the biggest thing that you learned through this experience? Then is that
That Heavenly Father will always love us. If I had to put it in one thing, it'd be that my Heavenly Father always loves me, and that love also often comes in the form of comfort and support, and not in the form of a not removal of,
miraculous?
yeah, not some miraculous miracle or some taking away of my pain and suffering.
Right. I mean, because, and I think it's really important for people to understand that sometimes we don't get the miracle, right? And
We
it
probably
doesn't
don't
mean,
often don't get the miracle.
yeah, I mean, and you wanted the miracle of, I don't want to go to prison. That didn't happen. But it did not mean that your Father in heaven wasn't loving you, wasn't there, and that the Savior wasn't with you. Like you say, to bring you, excuse me, to bring you peace and comfort in other ways. Like you said, um, a letter would come on a really bad day. That's not a coincidence. The Japanese guards loved you in a way that they should not have. That's not a coincidence either.
And sometimes when I would see these letters of people that would come in, some letters came from people that you would expect: my parents, my siblings, my wife, things like that. But I got letters from all kinds of people once my case became very public, and there was thousands of people following the story. I got letters from people that I had never met before, and to see the level of effort. We live in a digital age where the idea of writing a physical letter, finding a stamp to put on it, and taking it to a mailbox is a large ask.
It is. In this day and age, people just don't want to do that.
Nope, and people did. And so I often thought about what motivated these people to do that. And so, more than when that letter showed up, it was what was acting on these folks to help them build the motivation and the strength to provide me with that tender mercy, to provide me with that lifeline and connection to the outside world.
Yeah. And it was the Lord, right? He was just like tapping Joe and Sally on the shoulder, going, hey, Rich could use a letter. And they're just like, oh, I'm going to write Rich a letter. and finding your address, which your wife must have given some address on Facebook or Instagram or something, right? So it's just, isn't it just so remarkable the love our Father in heaven has for us and the way he moves in our life?
Yeah, and it doesn't go away. And I think another thing that we like to talk about people is that you need to understand what God's love and God's role in our lives feel like when things are happy, and also in our lowest moments, because they're different. But that doesn't mean that they're also not the same.
Yeah, like what do you mean when you
Yeah,
say they're
I
different?
think when I think about my most like spiritual moments of my life, or powerful moments like the birth of my children, and the kind of spiritual connections I felt in those moments, and thinking, okay, well, this is what it feels like to have God in my life. And then on the flip side of that, when you are struggling and when you are searching for answers and you feel alone and isolated, well, that it's more subtle in those moments.
Hmm.
And for me, it comes from just a strong belief or conviction that even here in this cell by myself, I know that my Heavenly Father is with me.
Were
Uh,
you able, so go ahead.
no, and so yes, like I those are different. They feel different. They, but they're both the hand of God in our lives.
Yeah, they're both powerful in different ways, right?
Mhm.
Were you allowed scriptures while you were in prison?
Yes, I had my scriptures and I read them daily, and that was a part of my routine to keep myself kind of grounded. So yes, and we also had we had a chaplain that would come and do a Bible study with us once a week or so, and those were opportunities to study the scriptures as well.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, Rich. So I just have one final question for you then. Why do you think it's important to recognize the hand of God in your life?
Because gratitude is the greatest form of love, and expressing it will help us unlock divine intervention like we have never experienced before. And it's also important to see the hand of God in our lives so that we can continue to seek it, because we don't know when or how we're going to need it in the future.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking your time out today and sharing your experience and your story and all the things that went on. Just so glad that you're home and safe and healthy and starting a new job. So you've been home now for almost a year.
Almost a year.
That's fantastic. So, well, thank you so much, Rich, for sharing with me today. And you're just a great guy.
Well, thank you. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share this side of my experience, and hopefully someone else who's going through a hard time can glean some strength from it.
Awesome. Well, thanks. You have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you have an experience where you have seen the hand of God or your higher power in your life, I want to hear about it. Please send an email to Sheila@beyondcoincidence.com. Have a great day.